In the library system, crisis sometimes occurs. In Missouri, the dedicated mental health librarians who investigate these incidents are members of an elite squad known as the Library Crisis Scene Investigators. These are their stories.
First one, we got 2 pages. You ready?
Over and out. Out.
May I help you?
I sure hope so. I'm looking for information on the satellites.
What type of satellites?
You probably know since you're part of the government.
I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe you should try looking up something else. Something real.
I need to find out which agency is controlling the satellites that are sending messages into my brain. They won't leave me alone.
Well, I don't know where we'd find that kind of baloney. Are you sure this is really happening? I mean, it sounds a little bit like science fiction.
I knew you were part of it. That's why you won't help me. This library is part of the problem. You better watch out or they're going to put you on the list. We all need to protest. Don't you care that your thoughts are being controlled?
Ma'am, you are being a little bit ridiculous.
Screw you. I'll say and do what I want. This is still a free country. To hell with you and to hell with this library.
Security, we have a crazy woman here in the library who's threatening everybody and screaming at the top of her lungs. Send somebody over here right now.
Ma'am, you are violating our patron behavior policy number 723D, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave this premises. Otherwise, I will have to call the authorities. The Storybrooke City County Library System is not going to put up with any of your nonsense.
You can shove your policy. I'll go outside, but I'll be back later. We will rock you.
I feel really bad about what went down with that satellite lady. I wonder if there was something different we could have done. I don't know how they expect us to deal with all these crazy people. They should all be locked up. It's ridiculous.
Well, you know, there's got to be something that we can do to help people in crisis. Hey, you remember that elite squad we heard about? Library Crisis Scene Investigators? Yeah, we should call them.
Hey, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
You look up the phone number and I'll call.
Okay.
Morning, ladies. I'm Dewey Read More with the LCSI unit. This is my partner. Read a book.
Welcome to our library. We are so glad you're here.
Oh, well, thanks for having us. We've all had situations that have gotten out of control in our libraries. I mean, patrons can become angry, destroy property, even threaten us with bodily harm.
And we found that library workers have little to no training in how to deal with a crisis in a calm and prepared way. So we'll review the crisis situation and give you some tools and pointers on how to deal with a patron who's angry, upset, potentially dangerous.
I know in this particular situation, the patron was dealing with mental health problems, but it's important to keep in mind that the tools and techniques are applicable to any crisis that may arise in your library.
So we'll review the crisis situation on the security footage and use our tools to analyze it, and then we'll determine what you could have done differently to ensure your success, the patron's dignity, and everyone's safety.
Here you go.
Let's use the stressometer to examine the various stages of crisis. A crisis may seem to appear out of the blue, but it actually has a continuum, much like the storyline of a movie or book.
Now, the stressometer gives us the way to view crisis situations. And if we can understand the different elements and phases of a crisis, it will help us better prepare responses and reactions. Now, in the middle of our model, we see the baseline. What do we mean by baseline? Well, that's when everything is going normal and we are calm. It's when something goes wrong that we see that line start to go upwards. Now that is the next phase in our crisis continuum, the triggering event.
A triggering event is any event a patron feels is a threat to their well-being, whether real or imagined. Some examples of a triggering event we may experience in a library would be a fight breaking out or a fire alarm going off. But sometimes when a patron comes to the library, they've experienced a triggering event that we cannot observe. They may be experiencing a major life change, a breakup, a death in the family, job loss. In the case of someone dealing with mental illness symptoms, the triggering event may come from internal stimuli, such as hearing voices. But whatever the cause, once that trigger has been pulled, the potential for crisis has been created. And we've entered the next phase.
Now the next phase in our stress model of crisis is the escalation phase. During this phase, we have the best opportunity to diffuse the situation. We need to use our tools to avoid a potentially dangerous situation. It's time to get out our communication kit. Now, in this communication kit, we have 3 types of communication: validation, nonverbal, and crisis communication. When you see the signs of escalation, get your communication kit because you're going to need it.
What are the signs of escalation?
Good question. Let's look at the signs of escalation and see if we can develop some effective responses to them. Now, one of the most common signs is raising one's voice or shouting, and the person may even use inappropriate or vulgar language. And we may notice there's some physical changes at this time as well. The person may exhibit increased muscle tension or shakiness or a redness in the face. They may even get in your personal space and point their finger at you. All these could be signs that this is escalating into a full-blown crisis. So, how do we respond during the escalation phase?
We should use the tools in our communication kit. First, let's look at our nonverbal communication and physical response. We should remain calm and poised, but not fearful. Make good eye contact and attempt to communicate your desire to assist the customer. It's okay to take a few steps back if the upset patron is starting to invade your personal space, but don't turn your back on them. Try not to back yourself into a corner. Also, it's a good idea to put a barrier between you and the patron, like a desk. Know your escape route and be aware of where other staff are.
What can the other staff do to help the one dealing with the crisis?
Other staff members should move in closer and be ready to assist if needed. They should be ready to call for help and might ask other patrons to leave the area for their own safety. Never assume the other staff member has it completely under control. If the situation seems to be escalating into a full-blown crisis, don't be afraid to call for the authorities. Calling for help is not a failure on your part, and it's always best to err on the side of caution.
Well, you said earlier that this was the best opportunity to diffuse a crisis. You also said that validation is a tool in the communication kit. Okay, well, what is validation?
Validation is the recognition and acceptance of another person's thoughts, feelings, sensations, and behaviors as understandable. It is one form of communication that shows our acceptance of ourselves and others, but validation does not mean agreeing or approving. One of the main reasons people get so uncomfortable in intense emotional situations is they don't know what to do or say. But when using validation, just being present and giving someone complete attention in a non-judgmental way is often very helpful.
Yes, and we must be careful to avoid invalidating statements and attitudes. Emotional invalidation occurs when a person's thoughts and feelings are rejected or ignored or judged. Invalidating hurts anyone's feelings, but it's particularly hurtful to someone who's emotionally sensitive and vulnerable. Invalidation disrupts relationships and it creates emotional distance.
Well, I still don't understand validation. Can you give us some real-world examples?
Give me a reason some patrons become upset at the library.
A patron comes all the way from across town to the library and the program has been canceled.
Okay, so say an upset patron comes to you and complains about the program's cancellation. You can be validating by actively listening and responding with a statement like, I totally understand your frustration. Anyone would be upset if the program they were really interested in gets canceled. Often, validating a person's feelings helps diffuse the emotions surrounding the situation. And if the conversation continues, you can tell them that the program is being rescheduled or is happening in another library branch on a different date.
Validation is a way of understanding another person's point of view. Validation builds understanding and effective communication.
Oh, so when I told the satellite lady that her beliefs were baloney, I was being invalidating. I didn't know what to say to her. All I was doing was making her more upset.
Exactly. Well, sometimes it's difficult to know what to say when people say odd or improbable things. Even though we know some statements are not based in reality, it's important to remember that for the person experiencing the crisis, these thoughts and feelings are real. Let's examine our crisis scene more closely and see how you could have responded differently using validation.
2 pages, you ready?
Over and out. Out.
May I help you?
I sure hope so. I'm looking for information on the satellites.
Oh, what type of satellites?
You probably know since you're part of the government.
I don't know what you're talking about, but maybe you should try looking up something else. Something real.
I need to find out which agency is controlling the satellites that are sending messages into my brain. They won't leave me alone.
Gosh, I sounded really mean and disrespectful. I didn't mean to.
Don't be so hard on yourself. It can be difficult communicating with someone who's upset. A good approach is to get the patron to tell you exactly what the problem is. When we're interacting with patrons, we want to validate their feelings, and it's a lot better to use empathy rather than sympathy. That way we can show we understand the situation from their point of view.
Yeah, empathy, sympathy, what's the difference? What do you mean use empathy rather than sympathy?
Great question. Let me give you an example. Say a patron was upset because their computer time was up before they'd finished doing what they wanted to do. If I wanted to sympathize with the patron, I might say something like, "Gee, sorry you have to get off the computer. The county ought to buy us more," which does not offer a solution. If I wanted to empathize with the patron, I might make a statement like, "I understand how frustrated you are that you weren't able to finish your work before your computer time was up. May I sign you up for the next available time?"
So, how could I have empathized with the satellite lady to better handle the situation?
You could say something like, it must be frustrating that agencies are sending information to your brain and won't leave you alone. Perhaps we can go find a seat and discuss this privately.
What if it doesn't work?
If the situation escalates into a full-blown crisis, it's time to take out our final tool, the rule of 5. When we apply the rule of 5, our sentences are no more than 5 words long, and our words have no more than 5 letters in them. Some examples would be, "Sir, you need to leave," or "Jim, put down that chair." By continuing to communicate with the person in crisis, we are sending a message that we are still in control of ourselves.
Oh, so it wasn't very helpful when I was citing library policy and threatening to call the authorities.
You were doing your best, and now that you know the rule of 5, you'll be better prepared for next time. In fact, thinking about and planning your overall response to crisis is a great way to be proactive.
Let's use our stressometer again to see the remaining 2 phases of crisis: recovery and post-crisis phase. Now, if a person was successfully de-escalated and no crisis occurred, everyone involved should congratulate themselves. But if a crisis did occur and the authorities were called to the scene, it is theirs and other professionals' responsibility to deal with the patron's post-crisis recovery needs.
The person experiencing the crisis is not the only one we should be concerned with. This stress model applies to everyone involved. So if the patron is in the care of the authorities or has left the library, then it's time to start thinking about ourselves. Don't minimize the trauma the incident may have caused for you and your coworkers. The recovery phase is something that everyone goes through, and that's us getting back to normal or our baseline. It's good to talk about our feelings about what happened and which techniques were effective and which weren't. So the final stop on our stress model is post-crisis depression.
Post-crisis depression is real. Don't be afraid to seek out help in dealing with any feelings or fears the situation may have created in you. If you don't deal with these feelings or fears, your ability to deal with crisis in the future could be seriously impaired.
Wow, those are all really great tools. I wish I could get a do-over with the satellite lady.
Actually, we have another gadget that allows us to recreate the event. Do you think you can apply what we've learned here today to have a better outcome?
I think we can. Let's do it.
Over and out.
Hello there. It looks like you're having some trouble with the computer. Is there something I can help you with?
I sure hope so. I'm looking for information on the satellites.
What type of satellites?
You probably know since you're part of the government.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I do want to help you.
I need to find out which agency is controlling the satellites that are sending messages into my brain. They won't leave me alone.
That must be an awful feeling. Anyone would feel terrible if it was happening to them. Why don't we step over to the comfy chairs and talk about it?
I knew you were part of it. That's why you won't help me. This library is part of the problem. You better watch out or they'll put you on the list too. We all need to protest. Don't you care that your thoughts are being controlled?
Ma'am, I know you're frustrated, but your behavior is beginning to bother the other patrons. Do me a favor. Take a deep breath with me. All right, follow me. Let's go over to a more comfortable spot to talk. Would you like something to drink, like some water?
Well, I am kind of thirsty.
Tanya, we're going to go to the Reader's Lounge. Can you keep an eye on the computer area?
I got this. Take your time.
Thanks. Here's your water.
Thanks. I was so thirsty.
I noticed that you were getting really upset. Is there someone I can call to help you, or would you like to use my cell phone?
Yes, I should probably call my caseworker. I'm feeling really out of it. I have a mental illness and sometimes I get paranoid.
Oh, we all have problems. It's okay. I just want to make sure you're safe.
I'm really embarrassed by this. I didn't mean to cause such a fuss. I love the library. I don't want to get kicked out.
Don't worry. You're always welcome in the library. And we're here to help. Next time you start getting upset, will you ask one of us for help?
Yes, I'll try.
That's all we can ask. Oh, and by the way, I have a list of community resources that you might find interesting. It's addresses and phone numbers of agencies that help people.
Thanks. This is something I could use. I really appreciate all your help.
Here.
My ride will be here in about 15 minutes.
Oh, well, would you like a book or a magazine to look at while you wait?
I have trouble concentrating. It's really hard for me to read. Do you have any music I could listen to?
Sure. You can pick out a CD and you can listen on the computer while you wait.
I don't know how to do that.
I'll show you.
Amazing. That went quite different than the first time.
Yes, it was. Amanda did an excellent job of assessing the situation and preventing crisis using some of the tools we discussed earlier. Amanda, what did you use?
Well, I imagined the stress model crisis, and I realized that she was beginning to escalate. So I decided I needed to use the tools in the communication kit.
Which tool did you use from the communication kit?
Well, first I used nonverbal. I made good eye contact with her, and I approached her in a calm, non-threatening manner.
I was impressed, and you really seemed like you wanted to help her too.
Well, I used validation, and I tried to empathize with her.
Yeah, and you were non-judgmental this time.
And being non-judgmental is key to any successful interaction using validation.
Well, I realized what she was feeling was real to her, and there was no point in arguing. I thought if we moved to another location, it would distract her. And I was really thankful that she called her caseworker.
You know, when you gave her that community resource brochure, I thought that was really great. You know, I feel really terrible about how I treated her the first time. I mean, I used harmful labels, I made assumptions, I was really judgmental.
Well, see, it's great that you recognize that now. The way we speak to or about people with mental illness makes a big difference in how we act, good or bad. You ladies are fast learners. Rita, I think our job here is done.
I agree. Looks like another successful library crisis scene investigation. Our jobs are pretty easy. Librarians are already so helpful. They just need some preparedness and training to help effectively deal with crisis.
Couldn't agree more. Let's go, Rita. There may be other librarians in need of assistance.
If you'd like to learn more about other aspects of serving library customers who have disabilities, please visit librarian411.org.